Hi everybody, and welcome to another Facebook Live for Project Oceanology. It is Marissa here today under this mask, and we are going to be learning about an organism in Long Island Sound that is often overlooked and even sometimes thought to be disgusting and gross. People actually tend to avoid it when they're on the beaches. So while you guys are logging on, if you want to go ahead and comment where you're watching from today, I'm always interested to know where people are watching from near and far. Also a special shout out to everybody who's home trying to get their schoolwork done or trying to get kids to do their schoolwork. We are here for you guys. So what I'm going to do today, I'm going to be talking to you about algae. So we actually talked a little bit about algae the very first Facebook Live we did, and it's called a type of microalgae. So I actually wrote you guys a little bit of notes so that I can show you guys as I'm speaking, so it's a little easier for you guys to follow along with me. So let me switch the camera around. Okay. So the first thing that we want to mention is that there are two major categories of algae. There is both a micro and macro. So the micro is the one we've actually talked about before, and more specifically, that would be our phytoplankton. So those are those small drifting organisms that are in Long Island Sound. They are creating oxygen for us, and they are also the bottom of the food chain out here. The one we have not talked about yet, that we are going to be focusing mostly on today, is the macroalgae. And that's probably the stuff on the beaches that you've been trying to avoid. And if it touches your feet, you probably want to get up out of the water. So algae in general is not flowering. It is typically aquatic, and it contains chlorophyll, but does not have any true stems, roots, or leaves. It can be found in both fresh and saltwater environments, and there is a very, very large variation. So algae can survive in very harsh conditions. So there's some algae that are actually found in hot springs and very salty water like the Dead Sea, and also in freshwater lakes and small little ponds that you don't think anything else would survive in. So we're going to be talking mostly about the macroalgae, or also known as seaweed, today. And I want to explain a little bit about it first, and then I'm going to show you some real examples that I've collected this morning, and then we'll kind of move into how we actually use it, why it's important, and how we can incorporate it into home crafts a little bit later on. So let me move my paper down. So there are three major colors for the macroalgae we're going to be talking about today, and they all absorb different amounts of light, and that's why they are shown as different colors. So we have red, we have brown, and we have green. So I'm sure you all have your own stories about seaweed at the beach. If you have any funny stories, go ahead and put them in the comments. I'd love to hear them. Get a little chuckle on this gloomy Thursday, and that would be awesome. So for the three different types, they're often found in different areas, but they can also be found close together as well. So the red can be found in deeper environments, the furthest away. So out of the three, it needs the lowest level of light. Our brown is intertidal, and it's kind of in between those two different colors. And green needs the most sunlight, and it's often found the closest to the surface and the shore. So what I want to do now, I want to go ahead and flip the camera around and show you some of the examples that I have found today. So give me a second here. I'm solo today, so bear with me. All right. So, before I came into the lab, I actually went down to the local beach that we have right on campus, and I tried to get a few examples of the different colors that we have today. So the first one we talked about was red, and I have two different examples. So the first example, I'm going to hold it up, try to get it close to you guys so you can see. So this is called Chondrus crispus, or Irish moss. This is a good example of red algae. We actually saw a lot of it on the beach. You might even see some that looks the same color, but it's white. And that's because it's kind of died and gotten bleached out by the sun. So if you see algae close to shore and it looks discolored, that's probably what's going on. So this is important, and we actually find it a lot in different products that we use daily. If you guys know of any products, or you think you know of any products that have seaweed in them, go ahead and put them in the comments, and I'll look at them a little later on. So this is our first example of red algae. Trying to get close without it being blurry. Perfect. The next example is a little harder for me to hold up. So a lot of these plants don't have a lot of support like they would on land because they're in the water and they don't need to be standing up. So this one looks a little funky, but I'm going to show you guys under the microscope what it actually looks like. So this is another type of red filamentous algae. We find a lot of this type of algae in Long Island Sound, and there are a lot of different species that look pretty similar. So you can see when you are looking at it like this, out of the water, it's really hard to actually see what's going on. So I've put this one under the microscope. We're going to transition again, and I'm going to show you what it looks like a little closer up. And this is how scientists actually will look at these samples to determine what species they are. So let me wake my computer back up. All right. So this is a zoomed in version of the end of one of those pieces of algae. So you can look a little closer at how they're segmented. Sometimes the ends of them, like over here, could be forked or curved, and they could be different that way. And if you're just looking underneath the microscope itself, you can see how when they are in the water, they're actually, we'll wake this up too, they tend to fluff up a lot more and expand because they want to get as much of that oxygen as you can. So if I move it around, you can see it's much fluffy and more feathery than it looked when I was holding it up a minute ago. So that's another type of red algae that we have out here in Long Island Sound. Let's move on to green. All right. Transitioning again. So, I found one type of green algae, and we tend to find this a lot while we're out in Long Island Sound, especially on our boats and our trawl net. This is one of my favorites. It's pretty simple but elegant, and you can actually see there are little holes in it. And this is called Ulva lactuca. It's also known as sea lettuce. So if you guys have ever had a seaweed salad, you've had either this or something very similar to this. You can see it's really thin, and you can also just eat this as it is if you'd like. I would just kind of rinse it off, but let me know if any of you guys have been on our boats and eaten a little bit of this. So these are our green algae examples today. And now on to brown. I have two species of brown that I want to show you. It's a pretty large example, but it was pretty awesome. So this is a type of brown algae called rockweed. And something special I want you to notice about this. So these types of algae do not have true roots, But they do have something called the holdfast. I'm going to try to hold it close so you can see right here, that they use to hold themselves onto different things on the bottom, mostly rocks. Or maybe if they're smaller, other shells. So that's what they use to hold them. So this is actually the bottom. So I'm going to try to hold it up so you can get an example. So normally, it's actually up like this. And all of the different plants are kind of together on this rock. So as the water moves, these blades are actually moving along with the water. And if you look a little closer, there's something on it. They actually have a pretty cool adaptation. And they use it to be able to get sunlight. So right here, you can see there's a little bubble, and it's actually kind of squishy. You might have also seen this while you're out at the beach too. So these are called air bladders. And here's another example, a slightly different species. See it pretty well. So you might have been on the beach and actually gone and popped these before. These are filled with air, and they are used to kind of help hold that plant up towards the surface so it can get as much sunlight as possible. So why do these plants need sunlight? So if you remember back to the very first Facebook Live that we did, we talked about how phytoplankton needs sunlight to photosynthesize, and they're photosynthesizing to create their own source of food. And these guys have been kind of ingenious with coming up with their air bladders so they can try to get up to the top and get as much sunlight as possible. Where these guys are hanging out on the rocks, they are actually really close to other plants, usually of the same species. So there's a little bit of competition for the amount of sunlight that they need. Oh, Chris also wanted to mention that they're often the reproductive bodies. That's true as well. Thank you for that. The next type of brown algae that I have, you're probably familiar with. If you saw the movie Finding Dory, you actually saw her swimming in a forest with these over on the Pacific coast of the United States. So I've got two examples of the same plant here. So has anybody ever seen this before? So this is a species of kelp, and we tend to find these while we're trawling. They're found a little bit deeper, and they can get up to 6 feet long. Let me hold it close so you can see. In Long Island Sound. So these are some pretty cool specimens. They have a very large, what we call blade, that is attached to what looks like a stem or a trunk, but it's called a stipe. If you were to kind of cut this in half, it would actually be hollow in the middle. And then at the end, at the bottom, it actually has this part that looks like a root system. So it's called a holdfast. So similar to the rockweed I showed you, how it's using that end to hold on to rocks, they are also using their holdfast here to hold on tight to the bottom so they're anchored. And you can see how thin these are, kind of like the ulva. Perfect. So these are some of the live examples that I have. I have another example of the kelp. This one is to show you the size, so I'm going to step back and show you this. All right, so this is in half right now. This is probably a full-sized piece. So if I hold it straight up and down, it's actually taller. I don't know if you can see. It's actually taller than I am right now. It is missing its holdfast and its stipe. So if it was out there in the environment, it actually would be even taller than this. So I really wanted to show you guys, even though this isn't a complete piece, I wanted to show you just how large this kelp can be. Perfect. So those are all of our live samples that I want to show you. I want to get back to my notes really quick to show you guys what we're going to be talking about next before we transition to the next station. All right. So you might be wondering what makes them different from land plants. So we talked about how they are both using photosynthesis to create their own food and to create oxygen. But unlike the plants from land, they don't have true roots, stems, leaves, or a vascular system. What that means is they do not use their roots and their stems to transport water or nutrients up to the top part of their body. So this holdfast is for physically anchoring instead of that transport like I was just talking about. And the reason for that is because they are surrounded by water, so they can just kind of take in nutrients as they need to. So they get that nutrients by the diffusion through the tissues. Unlike plants on land that need to use the roots, transport it up the trunk, to the branches, to the leaves, and so on and so forth. So we do want to talk quickly about why they are important. So microalgae, like those phytoplankton, we said are the bottom of the food chain out here, so they are very important for all of the animals that are living in Long Island Sound. These also create habitats and hiding places for animals. So if you can imagine that rockweed surrounded by 30 other rockweeds, that's a really good hiding place for some small fish or maybe some crabs. And they are used in a lot of different ways, one of which they're actually used in laboratories and in medications. So, some additional uses. Tell me if you're surprised by any of these. So they are used as a smoothing and thickening agent in a few different products that we use every day. They are used in ice cream, toothpaste, yogurt, a lot of beauty products, sushi, and also some kids snacks that we're going to learn about in a second. A lot of what you're going to see if you look on the ingredients is this word right here, carrageenan. So that is actually taken out of the Chondrus crispus or the Irish moss that we were talking about before. So what I want to do, I have a little setup of some different types of products that use seaweed, and some of which you might have had more recently than others. So I want to go ahead and show you that really quick. So I have gone ahead and kind of laid out some different types of products, and below it I put what it's labeled as in the ingredients so you can take a look. So let's kind of go around. So here we have some toothpaste, and you'll see if you look in the ingredients, you'll see some carrageenan. The next type of product we have, if you look in the ingredients, it's called bladderwrack, very similar to our rockweed extract. And this, let me try to pick it up and get you a little closer so you can see. It is some sunscreen. So sunscreen also needs to be a certain consistency, so they add some seaweed in there to make it that proper consistency. The next item is some good old hand soap. Probably been using this a lot lately. And if you were to look in the ingredients, very similar to the sunscreen, you'll see the Fucus vesiculosus extract. So these are basically the same extracts, it's just two different ways to say it. The bladderwrack is the common name. Fucus vesiculosus is the scientific name. The next item we have today is some aloe skin gel. If you look on the ingredients for this, you will just see seaweed thickening agent. So it might be the same as that extract. It might be something slightly different. So now we're going to be moving on to the food. So I remember eating these a lot as a kid. We had some fruit gushers. And if we were to look, we would see agar-agar. So that is probably what makes it the outside nice and squishy. They're adding it to that. The next thing we have is a bottle of Nesquik, some chocolate milk. And you will see carrageenan in the ingredients. And my personal favorite, and probably what you guys love as well, some ice cream. So this is some fish food. If we look closely in the ingredients, about the third row from the bottom of the ingredients, you'll see salt and carrageenan. And then we also have some uses that are in their more natural form. So if you like sushi, there's a type of red algae called nori. It's just very thin. You can kind of see it on top there. Or if you're super hungry at the store, you can look for these sea sticks and you can actually eat them. They're kind of crunchy and a little salty, but overall, they make a pretty good healthy snack. So if you were surprised by any of these having seaweed in them, go ahead and let me know in the comment, because I was a little surprised when I read about it at first, and normally students aboard the boat, when I tell them, are also very surprised. None of them tell me they will not eat ice cream though, which is a good sign. So the next step I want to talk about is if you're going to try to take these home and do some crafts. So I have a herbarium press here. This is kind of like a version that can hold a lot of different samples, but you can make something very similar to this at home. So I want to kind of show you the parts of it and then tell you some ideas that you can use to do this at home. So it's got wooden frames on either side, and that's just to kind of add structure and make sure they're flat. And it's got some straps to hold it together. So let me undo these straps really quick. And inside, there are a lot of different layers, so you can add multiple samples to this. So I'm going to take off that first wooden layer, and you can see there is a layer of cardboard. This works well to kind of create air to help dry out your sample. Then next, we have some blotter paper. Now, if you don't have blotter paper at home, you can use newspaper, would probably work pretty well. And that is basically just to get a lot of the water out. It kind of helps to, it's a little thick, and it helps to absorb a lot of the water in your specimen. So now, you can see, you can put your specimen there. Some people will actually put parchment paper in between as well. That's optional. And then they'll have their item, and sometimes they'll actually label it as well. So then once you kind of take your item off, you'll see there's another layer of the same thing. So, like I said, you can go as many layers as you'd like, as long as you can hold it tight, either with some straps or maybe with some heavy books that you're going to put on top. So what I'm going to do really quick, I'm going to take a piece of that chondrus and I'm going to press it. So sometimes if the algae, like the other red algae I showed you, doesn't look really nice, it's a big ball, you might want to float it in some water in order to get that algae to spread out. Luckily, with our chondrus, it's pretty structured already. So I'm just going to go ahead and add it to my herbarium. Now I'm going to put my blotter paper on top. I'm going to push it down a little bit. Add my cardboard. And then finish it off with my piece of wood. And now I'm going to tighten it and leave it there for about a week. Okay, so if you don't have a herbarium and you don't want to make one at home, you can also try this in an old book. I would suggest using an old book because the sample will actually start to kind of, let me show you an example. It'll start to kind of create a little discoloration, especially if you use it a few times. So you don't want to use a nice book that you plan to read again. But you can do that as well. And you can also use paper towels if you don't have any newspapers as well. Anything really to absorb the moisture of your sample, especially if you're going to use algae because there's already so much water in it. So another idea that I saw you can do is you can, if, say you want to press like flowers that you have at home, you can actually put it in between parchment paper and iron it. And that should help you create a flattened look as well that you can use for crafts. So I have some examples of some different leaves that were pressed by some students back in the fall. So you can also make this into a little science lesson. You can go around in your yard and find some leaves or other plants and come back, try to look up what species they are and maybe learn a fact about them. And then you can press them to use later. So some examples I have for the algae. Some cool ones I want to show you that we didn't see today. So this is called codium, and it is also called dead man's fingers. So when this is a live sample, it's actually a little bit squishier, kind of like spongy, and they thought it looked like dead man's fingers. So that's the nickname or the common name for it. Another cool example, let me flip over, is one of my favorites, and my coworkers' favorites. This is called corda, and it is actually a really long, looks like a string. And when you put this into the water, it's actually got little tiny fibers. I don't know if I can show you, kind of. So it also looks like a hairy shoelace, and we call it that sometimes as well. So that is the corda. Now let me flip on over. You can see we have a lot of different pages of different species. So this is another type of red algae that's more of a blade. It's called Palmaria. You can also see where the hold fast would be at the end. And last but not least, it's another cool one called Porphyra. So this one is a thin red sheet that looks really cool if you're going to try to press it. So if you are going to try to press any algae, this is an example of similar to the one that we saw under the microscope. So you can see how it was kind of spread out. So you can see close up what it looks like rather than a big blob. So the last thing I want to show you to do, if you don't want to press but you still want to do a creative activity, is you can kind of do a little pencil trace over some leaves. So you can see I did a few here. And then I have one more I want to show you, just to show you how easy it can be. So let me flip it around one last time. And I want to angle the camera down so you can see the paper. Alrighty. Get you nice and close here. So I have a birch leaf for my last one. So all you need to do, this is really easy to do, especially if you have small children and you want to get kind of crafty. You're just going to take a piece of paper, put it underneath, and then you can kind of feel around where the edge of the blade is. Let me try to figure it out. Okay. So then you're going to take a colored pencil, and you're just going to gently trace back and forth. I usually start at the bottom of the leaf, and then you just kind of trace back and forth, follow it a little bit, and then you'll get to the actual leaf itself, and you can follow that middle part up again, but then you can see on the sides, you start to see some of the veining in the leaf. So then I keep going until I find the edges. So with a birch leaf, it's really easy. You can see the little squiggles from the edges here. So then I like to continue up to the tip of the leaf. And then once I have one side, I switch around to the other side. So the key is to do this, just lightly graze back and forth over it until you get a nice outline. And then if you want, you can kind of go back in lightly to get some of those details. So like I said, you can do this with your small kids, your large kids, do it yourself. Just kind of a fun way to get crafty with some nature. So then you can see, get a nice outline of this leaf. So you can leave it on this paper, or you can go ahead and cut it out and use it for an alternate decoration. So that is about the end of my algae talk. I hope you guys enjoyed it. And if you end up doing any of these creative crafts, go ahead and send it to us because I'd love to see what you come up with. And look forward to our Facebook Live next Tuesday, 9:30 in the morning. Thank you guys. Enjoy the rest of your week. Get out there this weekend. It's supposed to be really nice weather. And maybe get out into your backyard and go adventuring. See you guys later. Bye.